Julian stepped into the small, gaily lit waiting area, with a mix of curiosity and nervous energy bubbling beneath his calm exterior. He had come here with his lifelong bestie Beth, who had convinced him that this was somehow a good idea. She was excited, practically bouncing beside him as they took in the eclectic decor. Plush velvet chairs, soft golden lighting, and walls adorned with glamorous portraits of men and women in a variety of elegant and daring ensembles. He tried to steady his breathing, unsure of what exactly he was feeling or what he was in fact expected to feel. The idea had seemed intriguing when Beth first brought it up. They had both been just a little bit drunk at the time. But now, standing here, he wasn't so sure. Julian is in his early 20s and around 5'8", with a lean, some might call, athletic build that suggests he's active but not overly focused on physical fitness. His hair is a soft brown, slightly long and slightly messy, in an effortless style that falls just above his ears, with a few strands often brushing against his forehead. His eyes are a deep hazel, expressive and sensitive. "Don't worry," Beth whispered, nudging him with a reassuring smile. "You're going to look amazing. Just trust the process." Beth stands a few inches shorter than her friend, with a curvy figure that she loves to dress in bright colors, patterns, or accessories. She always seems to know what works for her. Her hair is a rich chestnut brown, often styled in loose waves that frame her soft, round face perfectly. Beth's eyes are a striking shade of green, always sparkling with mischief and warmth. Julian opens his mouth to respond, but before he can, a tall, statuesque woman glides into the room, her presence commanding and confident. She is elegant, with a sharp, confident gaze that softens as she takes in the two newcomers. Long black hair falls in beautiful curls around what can only be described as a perfect heart-shaped face. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. "I'm Madame Clarice. You must be Julian." Julian nodded, feeling a bit self-conscious under her intense yet polite scrutiny. He can tell this woman knows exactly what she is doing and how to do it. "It's a pleasure to meet you," he manages, trying to keep his voice steady. "And you, my dear, must be Beth," Madame Clarice continues, turning to his friend with a knowing smile, her eyes twinkling in a way that makes Julian a little suspicious. "I've heard quite a bit about you. Shall we get started?" She turns around and pushes open a large pink and gold ornate door with the words, "Madame Clarice's Gender Experiences," and steps through it. "First things first," Madame Clarice said, motioning for Julian to take a seat in a plush purple chair positioned in front of a large, ornate mirror. The chair is deep and comfortable, upholstered in a rich velvet that invites him to sink in and relax. Julian hesitates for a moment before sinking into its softness. He sees his reflection staring back at him, anticipation and uncertainty in his eyes. Madame Clarice began to arrange a variety of makeup on the vanity in front of him. Julian's eyes flickered over the assortment, feeling a mix of curiosity. He is no stranger to makeup. His teenage years had some secretive exploration that even his best friend Beth did not know about. Now, faced with the prospect of it being applied to him by a professional, he can't help but wonder how he will feel. "Makeup is an art," Madame Clarice said softly. "It's not about hiding who you are, but rather bringing out the beauty you are from within. Today we're going to bring out a side of you that maybe you've never seen before." Her eyes seem to twinkle as she speaks. She began with the foundation, selecting a shade that matches Julian's skin tone perfectly. Her movements were precise, almost surgical, as she applied it with a soft, rounded brush. Julian felt the coolness of the liquid foundation as it touched his skin, the brush gliding over his face with gentle, sweeping motions. The texture is smooth, and her movement softens his features, hiding away what left of his light beard shadow, bringing out something beautiful. Next, Madame Clarice moved on to contouring. She selected a slightly darker shade, using it to define Julian's cheekbones, nose, and jawline. With each stroke, she sculpts his features, softening and plumping, creating softness where there had been angles and depth where there had been flatness. Julian watches in awe as his face seemed to change before his eyes. The contouring brings out the natural shape of his face, but in a way that feels distinctly more pronounced, more feminine. Contouring is key, she explains as she works, her eyes focused on the task. But it is a little easier, it seems, to feminize your appearance than my usual clients. Julian's eyes darted to his reflection, noting how the contour had subtly softened the lines of his face. His eyes move on to where Beth is poised in her own plush pink chair, her eyes smiling happily as she looks at her friend. "How do you feel?" she calls out. "I don't know yet," Julian replies, his voice a little shaky. Madame Clarice then turned her attention to his eyes. With a smaller, tapered brush, she begins to work on his eyelids, sweeping muted earthy tones across the creases, adding depth and dimension. Julian felt a slight flutter in his chest as she lines his eyes with a dark brown eyeliner, the tip of the pencil gliding along his lash line with precision. The liner elongated his eyes, giving them a captivating, cat-like shape. A sultry, beautiful feminine individual stares back at him. "Oh God," she says back softly. "Your eyes are one of your most expressive features," Madame Clarice commented, stepping back to admire her work. "With the right makeup, we made them even more captivating." She moves on to his lips next, selecting a dark pink lipstick that complements his skin tone. Julian feels the creamy texture as she applies it, the color adding a touch of warmth to his face. The pink is subtle, not too bold, just enough to draw attention to his lips, making them look soft, more defined and more kissable. Madame Clarice finishes with a dusting of translucent powder, setting the makeup and giving his skin a matte, velvety finish. She steps back, tilting her head as she examines him, like an artist examining her painting. "How are you feeling?" Beth asks again, her voice filled with excitement now as she leans over his shoulder to get a better look. Julian blinks, still processing the transformation. He studies his reflection, taking in the changes, the flawless skin, the sculpted cheeks, the expressive eyes that now seem huge and holding a soft allure he hadn't noticed before. When he finally replies, his voice is quiet. "She looks beautiful." Madame Clarice's eyes sparkles with approval as she met his gaze in the mirror. "Good," she said with a nod. "Now let's find you something to wear." "Oh my goodness, you kept your promise," Beth says in a delighted voice, as Julian emerges from behind the little screen where he undressed. He is now wearing soft but tight skin-colored briefs as Madame Clarice requested, and nothing else. Beth's eyes take in the pale and smooth legs before her, the ones he so painstakingly waxed last night. "Wow, you have some lovely legs on you, Julia," Beth teases. Her eyes have a hint of seriousness, and is searching his as she speaks. Julian stares at her for a moment, but before he can answer, Madame Clarice walks in, pushing 2 large racks of clothing. Julian felt a strange mix of emotions as he browsed through the options, each one representing a different version of himself that he'd never explored before. There were elegant dresses, playful flouncy skirts, and chic blouses, each with its own personality, its own way of expressing femininity. Madame Clarice selected a sleek, form-fitting black dress that hugged Julian's newly found feminine figure. The fabric is soft and luxurious against his skin, draping beautifully as he steps into it. The dress accentuated his waist, flaring out slightly at the hips, ending mid-thigh and leaving his smooth, long, bare legs on display. Julian gives a little spin in front of the mirror and hears Beth clap, her eyes shining. Julian stands there, jaw on the floor, barely recognizing the person staring back at him. The transformation was complete, from the flawless makeup to the carefully chosen outfit. He looked so different. "Well?" Madame Clarice asked, her voice soft, yet filled with a quiet pride as she stepped back to admire her handiwork. "What do you think?" Julian stared at his reflection, a swirl of emotions rising within him: surprise, curiosity, and a growing sense of satisfaction. Beth claps her hands together, her face lighting up with joy. "I think we are going to get into a lot of trouble tonight,"